Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with TJ Mead and Gayle from Netflix about business continuity and technical continuity. Guys, great first segment, a lot of good information there, and you talked about challenges. One of the things at the end of the first episode, I really liked what you had to say is that instead of trying to approach it, this is what we do for the organization, you made it seem more personal. You approached the people and said, here's what we do for you. And many people don't understand what an entire organization does anyway. There's pieces they never come in contact with. So to make it personal, uh, really must have made a big difference. Was that one of your discoveries, aha moments? And were there any others?
I I think that I don't know where that came from. I don't know if that was an intentional decision or an intentional action. I think, the great thing about where we work is that we get very honest and transparent feedback. And so every time I would fail, and so like if I met with you, Alex, hey, listen, we're the continuity team, we're here to do an assessment, blah blah blah, and you said no, I would probably give it like a week or two and follow up with you. Like, hey, listen, what did I do to miss the mark? How did I screw this up?
Mm,
Because you have a budget of $100 million. You are absolutely in our product line. You are a critical path to our products we're offering our customers. So I see the criticality and the importance of this work. What did I do to not get that message across? And what I love about this place is like, look, it sucked. It was a garbage presentation. I didn't understand where you sit or whatever the information was. Okay, great. So I take that feedback and I make it better for the next one, right? Or I'll give it a couple more weeks and I'll go back to that same individual and be like, hey, here's the marks that I missed last time. Does it make sense for this work to take place this year or next year? When does it make sense for you, right? So that was the effort too. Another thing too that as TJ and I are exploring, we're trying to understand the business, right? Because we came in at a time where we were heavy in our transition into, well, not heavy in transition into streaming, but DVD was being offboarded, so to speak. Like we were going to leave that and we're going to invest into games and live and in-person experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So the business is changing, and that means there's more product lines and more critical paths and things like that. So we would sit down with those individuals and say, hey, listen, we're going to start with, hey, we know that how big the pot of money is that's being invested into your specific area. What are the things that you depend on to do the great work that you're doing, right? Because all
mhm.
me and TJ are trying to do is ensure that you've accounted for all the continuity and resilience concerns for the things you're responsible for and the relationships that you need to be in place.
TJ, do you have
Yeah,
anything? Go ahead.
I would add that I think the earliest aha moment I can remember was specifically around the fact that our value proposition to our internal customers was going to be different depending on who we spoke to. So let's say we're talking to our internal incident management team. Well, for that relationship, it was more around, hey, why don't you let us offload some of the work from you? Because then we can go out and do assessments on a lot of the particular assets that come up during incidents, right? Let us take some of that upfront work off of your hands. So that ended up being a win-win for both teams, right? So we won in that we could do and get our assessments done on things that were really impactful for the company. And they got a win because they didn't have to do it and they reaped the benefits of all the data that was coming back to them. On the other hand, if we're over on the studio side of the house, the value proposition there is very different. They're so, Gail, keep me honest with my wording here. They're so tactical about they operate in a risk heavy environment anyway. So they already have documentation for their stuff. They already have established procedures. So from that side of things, it was more of the checks and balances thing that, hey, have you thought of this? Have you considered this? It's more of a collaborative thing on that side, whereas it's um, feeding each other on the technical side of things. So it's us being very adaptive and changing that sales proposition depending where we're at in the company. Like that was a big aha moment at the early
Mhm.
on.
There's something you both have said numerous times that I really like. Instead of saying or coming from the perspective business continuity or technology continuity, this is what we need, this is what we need. You're both saying a lot, quite a few times now, what's for you? What can I do for you? What do you need? How do you do this? Is that change in perspective one of the successes you would see in business continuity or resilience programs, whatever an organization wants to call it? Would you see that as one of the successes
I
I think
or successes? Sorry.
I would say that it absolutely is, but I would also tie that directly back to the culture thing that we're not a heavily regulated organization, right? I came from did a lot of time with banking, pharmaceuticals, et cetera. Those are all heavily regulated organizations that say
Mm,
thou shalt do enterprise or thou shalt do business continuity, thou shalt do disaster recovery, and the regulators will hit you over the head with a hammer if you don't. We don't have that same sort of regulatory environment, and as a result, because of the freedom and responsibility culture, we have to make it about them, because if we didn't, well, chances are Gail and I wouldn't be here anymore. So it had to be tailored that way as a result of the organization that we walked into. But I would still maintain that anything that we've developed so far, I would absolutely take that same approach, even if it was a regulated environment, because we get a lot better participation as a result of it.
mhm. Gail?
no, I was just going to echo what TJ said in regards to understanding like what the customer actually wants. Like, what do you need? All right, you already have an emergency action plan. You already have an incident management plan. You already have all these things in place. I'm not going to waste your time in redoing all this work. Let's talk about continuity of efforts. And when you and here's a little bit of education comes a long way. Very early on, a leader made the comment, "Well, we just got through COVID. We can work from home." I said, "Listen, Bob, that's great, but here's what I'm going to tell you: if there's an earthquake and we lose a specific geographic area, you're not worried about working from home. You're worried about finding shelter for you and your family because your house is no longer tenable." So
Mm,
when I presented it to them in that light, like COVID is a fallacy. Like, cool, we hope that we can just go work from home, and that solves 98% of our problems. As we talk about continuity, right? But if you can't deal with that, or more importantly, your entire team works in one geographic area. So if whatever happens in this area, who else in a different region can still execute that role or those critical activities? And do they understand? Do they know the vendor's phone numbers, or are they going to go to the google.com and search for their business 1-800 number to call them and ask for help? Having them is like, listen, we're going to help you with response time. We're going to decrease that. More importantly, we're going to set some thresholds for decision making. Hey, here's all the decisions Gail can make. Here's all the decisions his manager can make. And then if it exceeds that threshold, then I need to escalate it. So that decentralized decision making has been very useful in creating buy-in for our program, because just writing a plan is a rehearsal in itself.
mhm. How would you, both of you, define a successful program? Because you've identified challenges, you've identified successes, and some organizations, no matter what they do, just never seem to be moving forward with their programs. So how would you define a successful program?
Uh, yeah, okay. So I'll start with there's two components that immediately come to mind. People are now coming to us instead of us seeking engagement with them. It's,
Mm,
hey, we heard that you guys help out with this. Hey, can you come work with us on creating a new business continuity plan? Or hey, you guys worked with us a couple of years ago to do some continuity assessments. We've now created XYZ. Can you come do more assessments on these new things? So that's like that I guess that's both A and B side of that. The other thing is our name is now started to get out there. We're not in every single area of the business quite yet, but we've grown enough that people are aware that we exist, and they're starting to say, "Hey, how can I incorporate the data that you're generating into what we're doing to enrich whatever they're working on, right? They'll say, hey, that data exists now. I don't have to go collect that. And that's new information, and it augments what I'm trying to do. So how can I incorporate that? So those two big things for me, I think indicate growth and forward progress.
Yeah, what I would add to that is so we do reassessments. So right now, I think our cadence is like 12 months. So we meet with you one time, we do the work, and then from that completion date, 12 months later, we come back to you. We're finally at a point to where we're now our reassessments are just as much as our net new assessments. And to that effort, if I come back to you and I say, hey, here's what you did last year, can you tell me what has changed? If you say, hey, we no longer have a personnel single point of failure, okay, cool. Why do you no longer have a single point of failure for personnel? Well, we used your report last year to create a use case for us to advocate for more headcount because of the criticality of the service or this asset that we were responsible for. I was like, holy, okay, that's awesome. That's great. Like our reports are generating business decisions in different teams across the enterprise. That's great. Another thing we'll come back with is, hey, you didn't have response documentation. Now you do this year. What changed? And did you get a new leader, or like was there a maturity thing or whatever? And I said, no, your report identified some significant gaps last year, and we made a deliberate decision to close those gaps and that's another great thing too, Alex. Like, I'm not going to tell you need to fix these things tonight. Like, that's not how we do things here. Hey, when it's appropriate, here are your gaps. You determine when do you want to close these gaps. Now, obviously, there's a reasonable expectation. You're not going to push it out to 36 months, right? But people here are of the professional nature that, okay, I have a gap. If I believe that it is critical, then I'll close that gap, or I'll address it, or implement whatever control I need to mitigate it, right? So that for me is demonstrated success. And then the other thing is just also leadership feedback. Hey, Gayle and TJ were here. They did this thing. You should go work with Gayle and TJ because they did good work for us. And then another VP, to TJ's point, they're coming to seek us for our expertise and our input and our work. So that's for me a strong signal. But that's like the last 6 months, right? So there was like 2 years of like getting out there, doing the handshakes, the meet and greets, the company presentations, regional presentations, et cetera, to basically spread that word that, hey, we are here, and this is what we do.
So really, instead, I always use the wheel and spoke type scenario. Instead of being another spoke in the wheel, you guys have really become a knowledge hub. You're a hub in the wheel, but you've got the knowledge there too. And now people recognize that. Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To TJ's point, right? So our data is being shared more openly, more broadly with different, and as we go to these new product lines, let's say you have a specific product line and you're trying to make the decision, like, should I be multi-region or should I be single region? Well, there's a similar product that's just like mine in this different team. Gayle and TJ did an assessment. Hey, they didn't make the decision to go multi-region. And every time you say something that has a negative impact on your score, you have to tell us why. Why are you not multi-AZ? Why are you not multi-region? Why do you have a single point of failure? You just 1 or 2 sentences on why. And what that does is now we have an information hub where people can come in here, gain consensus and understanding, and then they can go have those follow-on detailed conversations if they need to.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
There's the piece that Gayle said, if you answer a question in a way that it negatively impacts your score, you are required to do that, to provide that context. However, there is also the option of not applicable, which we agonized about not applicable, because I remember stating quite emphatically at one point, like, there's no way this can be not applicable. And sure enough, we found some edge case that yes, not applicable was an option. But if you answer not applicable to anything, you are also required to tell us why that specifically is not applicable to you. Because then, let's say incident management pulls in data, they're having an issue with a particular asset. They can look at our data and say, oh, have we tried auto scaling? Oh, well, they answered auto scaling is not applicable to them, and this is why. So they can just immediately say on to the next thing and move on past that.
Yeah, really. I like how you described that, especially the piece about leadership coming back, and then what you just said the not applicable. Yeah, that's an acceptable answer, but why? Why is it not applicable? Because there has to be a reason for it. And I've discovered, and you probably both did too, that some people will say not applicable just so they can get something off their plate. Only to discover later on that, uh-oh, there's a big gap that was missed. It's probably happened to both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in our reports, if you mark something not applicable, there's a call out section on our final report that says all of these responses were marked not applicable for the following assets. So we give them the question, the answers that the survey person completed, and that context. When that report goes to the leader, then the leader can say, well, why is multi-region not applicable? And they can go have that conversation, SMED, subject matter expert to subject matter expert, and they can deduce and then sometimes we get feedback, no, that's an appropriate response, or no, change that to whatever the appropriate response is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's also unknown, and
Mm-hmm.
unknown was another tricky one. But the way that we treated unknown was that if you answer unknown, we will treat it as a negative response. And that impacts your score, and it puts the onus back on that subject matter expert. Like, go find out. Now, Gayle always tells our customers that, hey, we won't hold this against you for 12 months till we do a reassessment, and that is accurate. As soon as they find out, they just send us a Slack message, send us an email, or go into the tool and update it themselves, and it immediately changes that score. So,
Yeah.
but it does create some impetus to go do the research to find out why, or find out what the answer is.
Yeah, I've mentioned in the past to some people too, they're afraid to say, I don't know, or it's unknown. And I say, it's okay. I don't know is an acceptable answer because it gives us something to look at as we move forward. We don't know, so let's investigate it to find out. So it's an acceptable answer. And I think a lot of people sometimes are afraid to give that answer because not everybody knows everything about everything.
Very true.
On that, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Gayle and TJ Mead from Netflix, talking about business continuity and technical continuity, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, and in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.